believe is not really covered in the marketplace today sufficiently. So we've spent, I don't know, $1 million in research, independent research, to come up with the Global Interconnection Index. And I just wanted to lead you through that today. It's an independent thing that we've sponsored that is downloadable, and it exists in a physical form, if you download it and print it out. But I'd encourage you to look at it and give it your peer review. So, for those of you who don't know about Equinix, briefly, we are a data center business. We're the largest in the world. We have data centers in 44 metros, as this says, although actually, as of this week, we've just added another 5 following an acquisition of Interconnection in Spain, who have also got presence in Portugal, so there's another couple of countries. And we've actually added another one in Istanbul this week by buying Xenium's data center. So all told, we'll be up to about 200 data centers around the world by the end of the year. And so this really is the platform, if you like, that gives us the visibility of what's going on in the digital marketplace, and that's really what we're talking about here. So the headline, and then I'll unpick the onion a little bit as we go. The headline is that private data exchange between businesses is forecasted to outpace the public internet by a factor of 2 in growth and by a factor of 6 in size by 2020. So that's quite a big sort of number. Whoops, didn't want to go there. So in summary, so I'll do the summary first, just in case somebody decides to leave the room after this point. This is basically all you're going to get. Is that the story goes as follows. Digital is transforming all industries. So now we're looking at the focus on enterprise industries. And they all need to become digital businesses. In order to scale the digital economy, you need interconnection. We're all here from an interconnection background, so we know it's sort of in our blood. But from a digital business, from an enterprise perspective, this is perhaps not so prevalent for them. Interconnection therefore becomes part of absolutely everything when it comes to macro trends such as digital trade, urbanization, cybersecurity. But until now, it's never really been measured in any systematic way. And that's what we're trying to fix at Equinix, to give the industry some sort of benchmarks and some regular updates as to how this private exchange of data between companies is progressing year on year. And as I say, it comes up with some predictions. So just to unpick that onion a little bit, won't be news to any of us in the room that every single industry is being transformed by digital, whether it be manufacturing. You know what people like GE are doing with their Predix model. We know about Uber taking over transportation, Airbnb and hospitality. It happens all over. And Accenture are talking about essentially digital being the driver of GDP growth on a global basis. So essentially digital growth is twice as fast as the rest of the growth altogether, and actually the key component of global growth. And I guess another sort of component as to why we are where we are today, Equinix, as NetNod, as Lynx, as a number of the other internet exchanges, started life out at the left-hand side of this diagram, which was creating places where ISPs could exchange IP traffic and offload it to each other. And the way that this has developed over the last 20 years or so, initially growing with the web guys coming in who have the content, who need to be co-located to the ISPs, the electronic trading players who realize that this is the right place to be if they're going to get the eyeballs that they need for their e-commerce, or that they need to have low latency connectivities for their trading platforms. They need to be in these locations as well. Last 5 years, I guess, the whole cloud story has really taken off, of course, and again, the big cloud players realizing that they need also to be connected into this network of other players. And then finally, and this is, I think, the thing that is really taking over now, the enterprises themselves recognizing, per the previous screen, that they need to become digital businesses. And in order to do that, they've got to play a very active role, really physically connected to the other players in this market. And so, without going through each of these different sort of macro trends, lots of luminaries from people like McKinsey and Gartner and IDC and all these people are highlighting big ticket items that are affecting the world, whether they be digital technology usage, whether they be urbanization, data sovereignty, data protection, etc., cybersecurity, trade. And the key thing for all of those things, which obviously have a massive impact on us worldwide, is that interconnection is at the heart of them. You can't actually make them work unless there is interconnection going on. However, as I've said, up till now, it's never really been monitored and any sort of quantification being done on how much that private interconnection actually happens. So this is what we've created, this global interconnection index. It is intended to become essentially a benchmark that can be used by anybody. It's not an Equinix only thing. Its goal is to track, measure, forecast the growth in bandwidth required for direct traffic exchanges between private interconnections among companies supporting digital businesses. It's a bit of a mouthful, but there's a definition of what interconnection bandwidth actually is. It's a private exchange. And as I say, there's the URL, equinix.com, resources, white papers, global interconnection index. So please download it, have a look at it, read what you will into it. The idea being that this will become something that we update every year. And I'll just give a few of the findings that it's already shown this year. We launched it in August this year. Just to comment, I suppose, I look at it as being, if you like, the infrastructure that's been laid down that will support interconnection. So it's a bit like the road network being distributed. It doesn't say necessarily that the road network is full of traffic, but it's how much road network has been put down. In this case, how much interconnection has been put. We all know about cross connects inside data centers. How many of those cables have been put in between racks in all of the data centers around the world? And obviously, we own nearly 200 of them, but there's probably 10 times that have gone into this particular survey to try and have an analysis of how much data is actually being provisioned or how much connectivity capability is being provisioned. One other sort of input to it, of course, is just the general growth in IP traffic. So this is growing, whether it be 22, 24%. The reason I put this up actually was because I think you'll all know the Cisco's VNI index, this thing that comes out every year that gives the state of IP traffic growth and generally the growth of the internet. The idea behind the Global Interconnection Index is that it becomes a similar type of source of reference. If you like, the dark side, one that's not so public, that's going on between companies. And whether it's actually 90% or whether this 90% is there because, in fact, that's what happens in icebergs, I don't know. But you won't be unfamiliar with the whole concept of private peering, who would know better, versus the public peering. So it's not a new concept, that a lot of the actual communication that goes on inside these data centers that we run is actually happening between businesses as opposed to going through any sort of public infrastructure. But as I say, it's up till now not been actually monitored in any way. So a couple of the sort of call-outs that this first view of the index has come out with. First of all, that the growth is forecast at 45% compound to 2020. So that's an enormous amount of growth. And as we say, practically double what is being seen on the public internet, and 10 times the amount that is predicted to be part of MPLS networks. And that it'll grow, to 5,000 terabits per second, which is an enormous amount of capacity being provisioned, and there's some indicators on the right-hand side of what 5,000 terabits might do. I think they're just astonishing sorts of numbers. I should probably just outline a little bit about how we've created it. I say we, it wasn't Equinix, although we sponsored it. It was a number of people like IDC, 451, Forrester, Synergy Research Group, that we sponsored to come up with the data. Essentially, they looked at a huge number of co-location facilities, third-party, multi-tenant data centers, looked at what was going on inside them, who was connecting to who. Obviously, we've got 200 of them nearly, so we could use that as a proxy to see who was connecting to who and what sort of traffic was being provisioned between those players inside ours. But also, you've got to be able to do that for Interaction, for DRT, for all of the other guys, as well as the small players that happen in different markets. We looked at, or rather, it was local markets were assessed on other things like the GDP growth, macroeconomic trends. We put together some other specific demand drivers of who was in those markets, and that came out with a predictive model. So we have a predictive model, and it's very big, and I don't know the details of it, but I'm sure somebody who knows a lot of Excel can work out how it works, and that's what comes out with these predictions. A couple of other ones that come out of here, and I'm not going to go through everyone in detail, but unsurprisingly, there is a regional cut of this data. So US comes out with the largest number of traffic, or the largest number of interconnection bandwidth being provisioned, but from a bigger base, slightly slower growth, albeit 40%. Latin America, clearly from a smaller base, growing fastest, and then Asia Pacific and Europe somewhere in between. So there's a regional split. Within each of the regions, there is a split by vertical market. So what are the enterprises, the end user enterprises actually provisioning? So unsurprisingly, again, telecommunications actually tops out as the vertical market that uses the most provisioned bandwidth, but actually banking and insurance over the course of the next 3-4 years is predicted to grow fast to actually match that in terms of the total number of terabits being allocated, and then the various other different vertical markets below. At the moment, the index has taken most of the key co-location metros. So in Europe, obviously that's Amsterdam, Frankfurt, London, Paris. The idea being that next year, next iteration, it'll be an annual basis. We'll be able to take in the next biggest ones, which would be Stockholm, Dublin, possibly Zurich, and one or two others of that scale. And eventually, it should become granular down to the level that we can actually do some detailed analysis on a country-by-country level at least. A couple of other sort of splits of this particular data that you'll see in the index when you download it. One of which is how do enterprises connect to different types of service providers? And unsurprisingly, network providers are the key provision bandwidth at the moment. But you see the huge growth in cloud and IT outsourcing, IT service providers that is predicted 160% growth over the next 4 years. When you look at the service providers themselves, whether that be the sort of the full gamut of network, cloud, financial, and obviously there's a lot of interconnection between network service providers. That again is not too much of a surprise. But again, you see that cloud and IT service providers coming at a very, very high growth over the next 4 years in terms of provision bandwidth. So that's another cut. And then there's another cut which is to do with what we call firmographics, which is the type of company that is actually using the provision bandwidth. Unsurprisingly, again, you might think the bigger the company, the more provision bandwidth they're going to use. So, whether that by be revenue or by number of employees, as companies get bigger, they will make use of more privately connected bandwidth in these locations. As companies are more global, more countries, they will take benefit of remote connections in lots more different locations. So whether that be numbers of sites distributed or in different countries. We've also managed to get a split on the types of technology deployed and how that might vary in terms of the proportion of spend on different types of technology. So certain types of technology. So, for example, the global traffic management, for some particular reason, has a particular propensity to require high levels of connectivity in lots of different locations. So there's that cut, and obviously, as companies, as enterprises now start using a number of different cloud providers, software as a service providers, they will increase the amount of bandwidth that they demand. So there's that cut as well in the documentation. And I guess to loop back a little bit to what we were talking about at the start about enterprises becoming digital businesses, and why the focus is really on how to help enterprise businesses become digital businesses. There's a sort of a snapshot of how they manage this complexity. So, as they move from physical interactions into digital transactions, and as they move from one-to-one discussions to one-to-many discussions, then this particular model comes into play, and they need to be able to manage many more interactions. Hence the reason why we believe this deployment into the types of facilities that we have, in Equinix, but in other data center providers as well, becomes the location of choice in order to be able to manage just that sheer number of interconnections of nodes. So one of the things that I'm interested in within Equinix is deploying additional capabilities. So it's all about product rollout. And within Europe, this is an example of rolling out additional interconnection capability within our sites in Europe, and that will continue, and certainly into the Iberian Peninsula as well now. But fundamentally, everything we're doing is trying to support this positioning as a platform where all of these service providers can meet the enterprises. And perhaps historically that's not been something that the independent, let's say, carrier hotels, as I first came into this industry, they used to be, when all we were interested in was talking about how to connect service providers to service providers. Now it's much more of a broad balance between how do you help a digital enterprise connect to all of those different services, whether they be an ISP, CSP, or other content provider. So that's really what we're going. And one other different resource I wanted to highlight to you, it's a technical resource. Again, it's not branded as Equinix or anything like that. It's a thing called the IOA, well, this particular thing is, but the next one isn't. An IOA playbook, which is our interconnection orientated architecture. And it's something that we've been working on to help enterprises get into this digital environment. And what it actually consists of is a blueprint or a set of blueprints which takes a company or helps take a company from the bottom left to the top right. The bottom left being symbolized as traditional business and the top right being symbolized as you're part of the digital world. And it's a set of blueprints. There's 4 different stages that's been separated: network, security, data, and applications. And each one has 5 different blueprint areas. I'd really encourage you to go on to www.ioakb, KB standing for knowledgebase.com. Again, you won't see any initial Equinix branding, although it's something that we've sponsored. We've really just taken the advice of what our customers have done, our enterprise customers have done, and tried to capture it in some very graphical and I think a very useful way. And you will need to register, and once you're registered, you can get access to all this information, download it. I should have said that on the interconnection index, that's not gated, so you can just go and download that straight away. So again, what we're trying to do is to help enterprises become part of this digital world, and this is one of the mechanisms that we've got. Be very interested to hear what your feedback is on that. So just to summarize, probably gained a bit of your time. Digital, transforming every industry. To scale, building blocks of the digital economy require interconnection. Interconnection, so that's at the heart of everything, but as yet has not been managed or monitored or predicted or quantified or analyzed. That's what this global interconnection index is purporting to do, and it's a living, breathing thing that will hopefully have a long lifetime to it. And it's coming up with some interesting predictions, just how much of the data that is being provisioned is outside the public domain and actually happens between independent parties. So with that, I will leave you with the URL. Please do download that. I hope you find that interesting. And I'm around, and my colleagues are as well, for any other questions. We've got a little stand outside if you want to have some discussions. As I say, we won't have any printouts of this document itself because we'd like you to go and download it. That's one of our success factors. So thank you. Any questions?
We have a few minutes for questions for Matthew. No.
None of the difficult ones. Super.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew.
Pleasure.
Thanks.